The first step in producing a high-quality crawlspace encapsulation is a thorough inspection and proper prep work. During the initial inspection, it's critical to evaluate 100% of the crawlspace. This ensures there are no surprises and allows you to clearly define the full scope of work before the installation begins. One of the critical components of the crawlspace inspection that often gets overlooked is the external component, or the inspection that goes on outside of the crawlspace. So we'll take a look at the home behind us, and we'll just call out a few things that are really important to note before hopping under the house. The first is going to be the location of the foundation vents as they relate to the grade on the outside of the home. So we'll want to ensure those vent openings are above the exterior grade, just so we know that water or moisture isn't going to be flowing into the crawlspace once it's been sealed. We'll also want to note the position of any porches on the house. So you can see on this home, there's a porch on the back. There's also a porch on the front of the home. And the reason that's important is because we'll want to ensure once we go under the house that there's a contiguous foundation wall behind that porch opening, and that it may or may not have access or give access to the underneath side of the porch. The final thing we'll want to look at is the location, position of the gutters, if they're present on the home, as well as the downspouts. And why that's important is we'll want to see any moisture or rain that's coming off the house. Is it getting away from the foundation, or is it accumulating along the foundation and causing what could be areas of concern that we need to look at once we go underneath the space? One note about moisture on the exterior of the home is that it's always key to address what moisture can be addressed on the outside before it gets under the home, as opposed to trying to address it all from the inside. Once we've inspected the actual components of the structure, we want to look at the grade or the exterior grade of the lot. So on this particular property, we can see visually that the grade goes from my left to right. So we can assume that any moisture that accumulates on this lot is going to move from this side of the house to this side. And so why that's important is we want to ensure that any water that accumulates on the high side of the property, or on my left side of the house, is making it to the right side of the property or the low side without inundating the crawl space with water. We can see on the porch that there is no gutter, and water has been running off the roof and accumulating around the foundation, as well as sort of running around this corner. So once we go under the house, we'll want to look at that area to ensure that there isn't a moisture or water problem being caused by something on the outside. Once we've finished the exterior component of the crawlspace inspection, we want to move inside. And the first thing I like to do is just kind of piggyback on some of the things that we noted outside. Most notably those porches. So we can see this porch that's over to my left has a really nice solid contiguous foundation wall. So we don't have to worry about that. There's also a solid wall in the front of the house. We know that the property is kind of graded from my back towards sort of the crawlspace access, which is over towards the front of the house. And we can see that there doesn't seem to be any signs of running water through the crawlspace. So it seems that that water that's coming off the house is kind of making its way out and around. In this particular space, we had another contractor come in prior to us getting here and remove the insulation. First want to identify, is there insulation, and it does need to come out. 9 times out of 10, it's going to need to come out. Also want to count the number of piers and also identify what type of construction they are. So these are standard CMU piers. We know that each pier adds roughly about 4 or 4.25 lineal feet to our overall measurements. We'll want to make sure to note that so that we factor in the proper amount of material. And then also the number of piers can drastically change the amount of labor time that you've got in the crawl space, and the amount of cuts you have, the amount of tape you need. So counting those piers is critical. Height of the wall, and then we'll move to the substructure. If there's anything that needs to be addressed on the substructure, whether that's fungal treatment, mold cleaning, or whether that's structural repair, foundation repair, settling, we'll want to look throughout the space to see if any of that stuff is present and make sure that we address that before we do anything on the ground itself. We don't have any mechanicals, we don't have an HVAC system, we don't have any water heaters, we don't have any ductwork, which is nice. We do have this wastewater line we have to deal with. Once we've done those things, we really just want to kind of get some measurements while we're under here. We like to encourage folks to use a laser tape. This is a Bosch tape, and it just makes it really easy and effective. So we'll just kind of take a shot here, kind of note our measurements. So I'm going to measure there, and measure there. So we're talking about roughly 55 feet lengthwise, and then we'll just go ahead and shoot a measurement for the width. See there, we got 12 and 16. So we're talking about roughly 30 by 55 or so. I like this. A lot of guys will use a wheel to roll and measure on the outside. I think the issue with the wheel is that it gives the inspector the opportunity to not fully inspect underneath the house. It's also crucial to note the size of the crawlspace opening to make sure it does not restrict access for you or your materials. For consistency, it's best to use a standardized inspection checklist. Accurate measurements are also critical. A detailed inspection prevents costly delays and callbacks down the road.